Well, I think we should go ahead and get started. Um, like I said, thanks again to everyone who's joining us. We're going to begin recording the event. So if just, a heads up, if you'd rather have your camera turned off for that. But thanks again for coming. My name is Nathan. I'm one of the co-founders of Harvard Forward. I graduated from the college in 2018. But this is not about me. This is about Harvard Forward and our three wonderful candidates who are running for the Board of Overseers in the election starting tomorrow. So if you're new to Harvard Forward, really briefly, we are a campaign to elect alumni to the Board of Overseers on a platform of climate action, racial justice, inclusive governance, socially responsible investing, and just social responsibility more broadly. We want Harvard to be a leader in facing the challenges of the 21st century, and we want Harvard to be accountable to its community members. And we do that by putting up really great candidates for the Board of Overseers elections, with which all alumni get to vote in every single year. And like I mentioned, this event tonight is about the three candidates that we're super excited to be supporting in this year's election. So we'll be getting to know them a little bit better throughout the night. Just a little bit of logistics before we get rolling. People are muted, like Danielle mentioned, but you can submit questions in the chat, or even just now, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, say where you're from, what your Harvard affiliation, school, and class is. Feel free to go ahead and do that. We'll be keeping an eye on the questions that come in and save them for a Q&A section towards the end. You can also raise your hand in the little Zoom feature if you want to ask a question. But we'll start with the candidates introducing themselves and having a discussion among themselves. And then Jennifer will host our Q&A section of the evening towards the end. So to start us off, Yvette, why don't you introduce yourself and share why you're running for the board?
Thank you so much, Nathan, for that introduction. And good evening from Seattle, Washington. Before I answer your question, Nathan, I want to start by acknowledging that I am calling in from the traditional lands of the Duwamish people, past and present, and pay my respects. And I want to thank Nahu and Hayes and my co-candidates here for challenging me to be more mindful of acknowledging whose land that I'm on. I also want to just quickly thank Harvard Forward team, the 3,000 plus alumni who nominated us as petition candidates on this platform, and my husband, who is HBS class of 2016 and is hopefully listening in from the other room. So again, my name is Dr. Yvette Efevbera. I am an alumnus of the Harvard Chan School of Public Health and a former resident tutor in Cabot House. And I am running for the Harvard Board of Overseers because I care about the lives that this institution impacts, and I care about its promise for creating a more just future. I really am humbled to be in this space with all of you today. If you had told me 3 years ago, when I last set foot on Harvard's campus, that I would be in this room virtually today, I would not have believed you. Now, as a student, I had incredible opportunities that Harvard offered someone like me, a proud state university graduate, a Midwesterner who grew up in rural Michigan, a daughter of Nigerian immigrants, now professors, who came to this country in pursuit of higher education opportunities. This institution helped me become a global health leader who's advancing equity and gender equality as an advisor at the Gates Foundation today. But toward the end of my time as a student, I wasn't feeling this optimism, because I had experienced a different and a disappointing side of Harvard. In 2017, while a resident tutor, I was inappropriately accosted by Harvard law enforcement in an undergraduate dining hall. in what I later learned was a case of mistaken identity. In their pursuit of a young Black woman, a non-student who looked nothing like me and who had allegedly committed financial fraud, HUPD mistakenly came after me in a very public way and challenged if I belonged. Now, up until that point, I had been advocating against racial injustice on Harvard's campus as a student leader for years, whether as a senior equity, diversity, and inclusion fellow or sitting on committees alongside faculty, students, staff, and administration. And I had even led the development of the university's first bias-related incident reporting tool, where 4,000 of my community members could report when they experienced discrimination with guaranteed recourse. But when a community that I had invested more than half a decade into, trying to make it more equitable and inclusive, when it excluded me, it was devastating for me, and it was traumatizing. And I knew that I would do whatever I could to ensure that another community member never experienced the same. Now, my story is sadly not unique. Too many alumni and students I've heard talk about the ways, big and small, in which Harvard's mission to educate the citizen and citizen leaders seems to have excluded their social and identity groups. Too many students and alumni like us are tired of being the only one in the room, of seeing excellent faculty of color leave, of being denied curriculum that reflects the realities of power and difference among communities that are reeling from the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 and unjust killings of Black people at the hands of law enforcement. And of not taking seriously broader issues like climate action, which we know is a form of environmental injustice, of racial injustice. Imagine if in 2022, Harvard was known as a leader in creating a more equitable, inclusive, and just society. Imagine if Harvard listened to students and alumni like us to use its position and its decision around its $42 billion endowment to advance the most pressing issues of our time, racial justice and climate action. Imagine if Harvard's governing bodies were led by alumni like us, right? Those who have spent years on Harvard's campus and have demonstrated collaboration and consensus building and creativity in how we advocate for change. That is what this election is about. When elected to the Harvard Board of Overseers, I will bring my experience, my expertise, and my enthusiasm to advocate for advancing racial justice through things like equitable student admissions and leveraging pipeline programs, hiring and retaining faculty of color, creating an ethnic studies department, and strengthening out of classroom environments as well. I will advocate for more socially responsible investing, including divestment from fossil fuels and divestment from companies that make their profit from private prisons. And I will advocate for a more inclusive governance body that values the voice of students and alumni like us. But I can't do it alone. And so on April 1st, last thing I'll say here is that you can act and you can vote for this same vision by voting for me. I ask that you stand with me and with my sisters here, Natalie and Megan, on the Harvard Forward platform for a Harvard that we know is possible, one that is a leader on issues that we care about, and one that leads to creating a more just society. So thank you all for your support, your commitment, and your time today. And I'm delighted to hand the mic over to Natalie.
Thank you, Yvette. Good evening, everybody. My name is Natalie Unterstell. I'm from Brazil, and I'm a mid-career MPA class of 2016. I joined the Kennedy School as a Mason Fellow and as a Bacon Environmental Leadership Fellow at the Center for Public Leadership. And I am running as a Harvard Forward candidate for the Board of Overseers because I want to see Harvard on the right side of history regarding climate and racial justice. And I want to ask for your support so that we can achieve this together. I've been working on climate action my entire life, and it feels deeply personal to me. I saw the effects of climate change firsthand here in Brazil, where it's very, very serious what's happening vis-a-vis the Amazon rainforest. I've also saw the impacts in Africa, where sea level rise is swallowing farming lands, and in Antarctica, where entire penguin populations are vanishing due to warmer seas. In my career, I've started actually working at the grassroots level alongside indigenous peoples at the forefront of the fight against deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. I learned with them the value of community and of building coalitions with all sorts of actors to get things done. And I then turned into policymaking and negotiating global climate agreements. I was part of a very successful story of making a signature agreement on climate and forest happen at the UN level in 2013. And I'm still involved in finding ways to accelerate action through national leadership and global partnerships. So my perspectives on climate leadership are informed by what I've seen, what I've negotiated, and what I've experienced at these various levels. I learned that we need to make steady progress because there's no time to lose. But we also need to move without leaving anyone behind and valuing diverse perspectives to get where we need to. Globally, I do think that we are on the cusp of a positive domino effect as more actors are stepping up and more coalitions are being built, for instance, around climate justice. My vision for Harvard is that it should join the current leaders ASAP. The time for exercising leadership is now, and Harvard needs to be intentional on that front. We have been leaders in so many fronts, I think we cannot miss this one. The question, though, is not whether Harvard should divest or not from fossil fuels. The question is, who will have the courage to listen to Harvard's community and to do divestment before it's too late? One thing I make sure everybody understands is that there's no way to get to net zero emissions if there is no divestment of fossil fuels and deforestation linked assets. That's the reason why students, alumni, and faculty have been for years now urging Harvard to divest from the major carbon emitting sectors. I'm inspired by these people who have stepped up in our community, and I want to say to them, I am listening. The Harvard Forward slate is listening to you, and we know the choice of the next overseers is going to be very consequential because the members of the board serving during this critical decade for climate action will bear the responsibility for steering Harvard into leadership. And I am asking for your support to make that happen. I want to see the university building up a bold strategy to address this and other important challenges with community-wide engagement. Therefore, let's elect members with a clear vision about how to move Harvard forward. As a woman, as a climate activist, as a policy expert, and as an international Harvard alumna, I'm here to say that we, Harvard Forward candidates, will not only value the voices of our community, but we can also be the voices of change within the board. We speak truth to power, we are courageous, and we want to see Harvard thrive. So we need your support to make that happen. Please vote for us. Please share the word about voting with fellow Harvard alumni. Thank you very much. And now, Megan, it's your turn.
Good evening, everybody. I'm getting emotional actually, because I think all of this is hitting me right now that we're doing this and it's really exciting. So I'm sorry if I get emotional, but I'm going to introduce myself in Lakota first. Michajiki Megan Redshirt Shaw, Michajiki Chanko Washtawi, Wazia Hanaha Hemataha Malakota. My name is Megan Redshirt Shaw. I'm an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. I have to wave to a very special pair. My parents are on this call, and I have not seen them in person since February of 2020. So I know for so many of us, COVID-19 is difficult, and we are all separated from our loved ones. So I have to acknowledge my parents who are on this call. I also need to acknowledge that I am calling you from the Native American Cultural Center at the University of South Dakota, where I'm currently the Director of Native Student Services. And as I have explained to my fellow candidates, I have a crafting night that's going on the other side of my door. There are 15 students that are screaming and laughing and painting and beading. So if you hear any noise in my background, I apologize for that. I also wanted to acknowledge there's a very special group that we had the opportunity to meet with last night, which was Native American alumni of Harvard University, who are supporting our candidacy. And I know that Emily Van Dyke is on this call, and I just wanted to acknowledge her presence and say thank you so much for your support of us. And to all of the constituent groups that are represented here, we really appreciate your advocacy and your support of us this evening. So thank you so much for spending the time. I am a graduate of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I graduated in 2017. As I mentioned to the alumni that we met with last night, I am not an expert on the undergraduate experience, but what I did experience during my time there was the Standing Rock movement that happened and the Dakota Access Pipeline. And this was an event that completely rocked my world as a graduate student and made me really think about responsible investing at the institutional level. I think that often we don't have enough conversation about how much the decisions that institutions make impact our students. And as a student services person, as a person committed to what our students' experiences on our campus, these decisions are critically important to me. I think that the opportunity to run with a platform like Harvard, to run alongside Yvette and Natalie at this time, it's critically important that voices like ours are represented. Those of us that are on the ground doing the work. What's really special about our slate is that we each occupy different areas of expertise. We bring a tremendous amount of knowledge to the table. And I think that all of us are deeply passionate and critical in the work that we do. And so as we move forward as a slate, as we move forward in garnering your support and understanding the issues that are critically important to you, we just really ask that you understand that each of us is bringing something unique to this and that we are more powerful together than we are as individual candidates. And this was the decision for many of us around running with this platform, being connected to Nathan and Danielle, who have done so much for us, and being really critically grounded in the work that we're doing. I know that many of us love Harvard. Many of us want to challenge Harvard to be different, to be better, to be bigger, and to make decisions that ultimately impact the lives of students. If that's the thing that we're all invested in and that we care about deeply, then why not move forward slates that reflect generations of people who are close to those experiences, who remember what it felt like to be there during times of great injustice when the university did not respond when we were asking them to. I remember very vividly walking around Harvard Yard with other Native students asking Harvard to consider the environmental and human effects in the decisions that they were making around this pipeline and other pipelines that have been created in the United States. So rather than echo the things that my other fellow candidates have already iterated, I know that we want to be here and be in conversation and open up the opportunity for dialogue this evening. And so since we've introduced ourselves, we can dive a little deeper into how the work that we do connects to the Harvard Forward platform, our vision for Harvard, and our leadership styles as well. So we are going to be doing first some questions to each other. I think that even in this time of distance, the three of us have not been physically present, but we are present together every single week. We've gotten to know each other. We love spending time together. And so I'll go ahead and open first with a question for Yvette. What is the responsibility of the Board of Overseers in focusing on racial justice issues and implementing policies that move the institution past words and into action?
Yeah, thanks for your remarks, Megan and Natalie, and also for that question. I think the first thing to understand is what the role of the Board of Overseers is, right? It is one of Harvard's two highest governing bodies. It is the governing body that is democratically elected. And although I'm not quoting directly from the website right now, but essentially it is a high-level advisory body that guides the strategic direction of the university. I think if we understand that as just a starting point, for me, it starts to bring to light the questions about, so what is the responsibility then in how the board strategically guides the university? The second piece I go to is Harvard's mission. And I was a resident tutor in Cabot House during the time that Dean Stephanie and Rakesh Khurana were there. Dean Rakesh Khurana is also the dean of Harvard College and used to open every meeting by reading to us what the mission of Harvard College was, right? And I will quote: "The mission of Harvard College is to educate the citizen and citizen leaders for our society. We do this through our commitment to the transformative power of a liberal arts and sciences education." If I just sit with that for a second, it is so unclear to me how we could actually advance, right, the education of citizen and citizen leaders, those who end up becoming disproportionately the leaders that are making decisions in our cities, in our states, in our countries around the world, without acknowledging the importance of racial justice. The last thing I just want to say is that I actually think all institutions, higher education and beyond, have a responsibility for creating a diverse and equitable and inclusive environment. And even though my daily job is focused on gender equality, it is always at the intersection of other identities and realities, including race and racism. And so I do this kind of work in my everyday. But when I think about Harvard and I reflect on the incredible opportunities and the communities that it gave me and the people who are forever in my life, from the Harvard Chan School, from the Graduate School of Education, where I spent a lot of time and was a teaching fellow, to the college where I got to work with students and teach students and support kind of life behind the scenes, to the Kennedy School, to the business school where I met my husband. It's such a unique institution. It's an institution that's voice is loud, that sets the tone. It is an institution where alumni like us do have disproportionate leadership. And so with all of these privileges, we do have a responsibility. And I think what we're all asking for as, you know, candidates on the Harvard Forward slate is for Harvard to live up to its responsibility, to listen to the voice of students and alumni and faculty and staff who have been asking to be seen and to be heard and to be valued in actionable ways. That for me is really what's at the heart of a responsibility that the board has, and one that I know we will bring when we're elected to the board. Whew, let me get off my soapbox here because I feel so passionately about this. I would love to ask a question to Natalie. And Natalie, I have loved learning about your passion for climate policy and the intersection with finance. And I would love to understand what an example would be from your perspective of how Harvard could actually play a role in addressing the climate crisis through responsible investment.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you so much. And I want to start by just quoting what Megan just said a little bit earlier tonight about all of us loving Harvard and at the same time wanting to challenge Harvard to be better, to become better. And as I mentioned before, I've been working on climate action for my entire life, and precisely against deforestation, which is one of the main causes of the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And amongst other things that I would like to see Harvard being better, becoming better, is precisely on responsible investment and the link to racial justice and to climate change. I was actually appalled to learn that Harvard's endowment is deeply and directly invested in farmland acquisitions steeped in illegal deforestation and violent expulsion of former enslaved Black communities from their homes here in Brazil. When I learned about that, I could not believe. But then when I realized that was very real, and I understood also that that was going against my own values and my own work, I was deeply disturbed about this. These are real people being affected by social injustices caused by investment decisions made in Cambridge, and on behalf of us. The students are the main reason why the endowment exists, and I truly believe that all students and all alumni do want to see this kind of role being played. Actually, we want Harvard to play a positive role and have a positive impact in that regard. So I want to see Harvard making this positive impact, not only in education, not only in scholarship, but also in the consideration of the allocation of funds. And we know that through the Board of Overseers, there's a lot that can be done. For instance, by approving or rejecting new members of the corporation, and also we will have the power to advise Harvard leadership on a lot of other issues. So I think we need to create a meaningful dialogue about responsible investment by Harvard within the Harvard community. And I think the Board of Overseers can be helpful in that regard. We need to create a space to talk about disclosure, to talk about divestment, and also reinvestment, which is currently missing. And now let me turn to Megan. Megan, I want to pose this question to you about how do you think can Harvard advance in promoting affirmative action, and what role should the Board of Overseers play in that regard?
Absolutely. Thank you, Natalie. If you know me, you know that this is the basis of my work, being an ed school grad and now in a student services role where I serve predominantly Indigenous students and students of color. I wish you could hear the laughter that's happening in my background right now. I believe firmly that this work is critical to moving the next generation of young leaders forward. And my first career, actually, my first love was in undergraduate admissions. I worked at the University of Pennsylvania, the Quest Scholars Program, Santa Clara University, and as a college counselor in a couple of different programs, teaching college access courses and having conversations with students about what it means to access colleges, access college opportunities. This is really, really the heart and home of the work that I've done and the things that I'm passionate about. I think that one of the responsibilities that the board had is in really understanding that these are systems that exist for many of our students. They are systems that are unfair, that are not equitable. And unfortunately, we have created a hierarchy that has established institutions to assess students based on a number of factors and areas that not every student has access to, resources that not every student has access to. And so being able to have holistic evaluation of every candidate, take their circumstances into account and understand their backgrounds and their stories, that should be the heart of education. What is the point of education if we're not providing an opportunity for everybody to be on the same playing field with each other? So again, being a Hugsy grad, I was with an incredible group of 50 people who moved into the world of higher education. We were in the higher education track together. And I think that so many of us believed that this was, affirmative action was at the center of the work that we did. So I think that for the Board of Overseers, really acknowledging and understanding that, again, as was mentioned before, the endowment matters, and what we choose to invest our time and our money into matters. And that includes students and student experiences and bringing diverse perspectives and voices to the table. The final piece that I will mention, and this was a great conversation that we had with Nahu last night, the foundation of Harvard's charter. Harvard was created for the education of English and Indian youth. Native people were actually used in the original charter of Harvard College. There was a very small plaque in Harvard Yard. For those of you that want to look behind a bike rack, you will see a very small plaque that acknowledges this. But the fact is that Native people and other communities of color, they're the foundation of who Harvard is. Without those students, Harvard's endowment did not even have a beginning because they were looking for donors. They were looking for people who were interested in educating diverse perspectives. And so I think that if that's the foundation of Harvard, where do those commitments exist? How do we continue to push that narrative forward? It is the responsibility of the board to see clearly about who Harvard has been and who Harvard wants to be into the future. So, you know, I could go on about this for hours. I know we want to open it up to questions. And so I will turn it over to Nathan for the next part of our evening together.
Awesome. Yes, well, thank you for all your wonderful insights. I'm going to introduce Jennifer really quickly. Jennifer is part of the Adaptive Leadership Network coming out of the Harvard Kennedy School. She's been a big supporter of Harvard Forward, and we are very, very excited to have her come in tonight and help with moderating the Q&A. So I'll just remind people to put your questions in the chat, and Jennifer will guide us through the next section of the event. Jennifer, also please feel free to add more context to the introduction in your own words.
Well, thank you, Nathan. I liked my introduction, and good evening, everybody. I am class of 1994, Harvard Masters in Public Policy, and Natalie and I studied the same adaptive leadership framework. And I think that what we have all come to in the last few years, it seems like it's in the news all the time, is that leadership matters. And if we want the leaders we deserve, voting matters. And what we know about this election that's so incredible is only 15% of alumni vote. So what I would just really like to put out there and encourage for everyone is to think about how each of us came here tonight, who listened to these three extraordinary leaders. What can we do to make an impact on this election? So I know that you're all going to be voting starting tomorrow, but how can you enroll other people to vote? How can you connect to the communities and the networks that you're part of? So Ann Weisberg is on the phone on the Zoom, and she and I are going to host a Zoom house party. Nathan and Danielle, under their leadership, have an amazing toolkit with all sorts of resources for how you can connect with your friends and colleagues and have reunions and again, elevate these voices, because we got this election. It's if we get turnout. So I just hope everybody knows that there's 33 of us on this call. We need to make this a cascading movement. So any questions that anybody wants to put in the chat? We did have a question about, does the Board of Overseers have any oversight to who is actually managing the endowment? So would one of our candidates like to talk about the relationship between the institution and the endowment and the issues of divestment? Natalie.
Yes, I can share a bit. So first of all, the overseers, they do not directly control the endowment. However, as I mentioned before, the overseers, they have the power to consent to the appointment of new corporation members. And this, of course, is an ability to advise and consent that can be leveraged, for instance, to make divestment of fossil fuels and divestment of deforestation-linked assets a priority for the Harvard Management Corporation. Another thing which I found very critical is that if thousands of alumni vote in these elections and get us on the board, it will create a mandate and essentially will put climate action up for a referendum now on the ballot, and showing that a large number of alumni care about this cause and are demanding action will create a mandate for us and for those in power to take action.
Great. We have an offer from India to send out individual requests to alumni. And their question is there a WhatsApp group of Harvard Forward folks where people can discuss or share ideas? Danielle, Nathan?
The short answer right now is no. We've been using a different messaging app called Slack to do a lot of our campaign organizing, but I know coming from Mexico that for international alumni in particular, WhatsApp is a really, really great communication and organizing tool. So we will get right on it.
And I just do want to also say that the international component is huge. Natalie, do you want to weigh in a little bit about international students and sort of how you're trying to galvanize that vote?
Yeah, so international alumni accounts for 20% of the Harvard alumni community, but very few vote in the elections historically. So our aim now is to mobilize more and more the international community. We're talking to Harvard clubs all over the world, starting with an endorsement here from the Harvard Club of Brazil, but there are other clubs involved. And we hope that people vote and that they vote for us. I think that's the main strategy. We have the toolkits translated to Spanish and Portuguese already. And if necessary, I think we can also translate to other languages.
Yvette, can I ask you, why is it important for everyone here to know that we should vote for all three of you, the Harvard Forward 3? Where's the strength in numbers?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jennifer. I think Megan said this really nicely earlier, which is that we all bring different angles, different skill sets, different experiences. And if we are all in the room together, that is where we can start to galvanize numbers in order to actually make change. Just to, I think a little bit more about the board itself. It's a 30-member organization. And when decisions are being made, when things are being voted on or discussed, having more individuals who share a similar platform, a similar commitment to the types of issues we've talked about today, that's how we're going to be able to start to extend and expand for change. We're super excited that there are already 3 Harvard Forward endorsed candidates from last year who were successfully elected by alumni onto the board. So when the 3 of us get on this year, we'll have 6 of us, which again, I think just opens the opportunity for us to not only build networks and collaborations with others, but also bring forward our shared vision and our different unique skill sets to advance change on the board.
Great. Megan, we have a question about the composition of the current board and how it seems to be dominated by business people and business leaders, and that back in the day, there was maybe more occupational diversity in terms of who served on the board. Can you speak to that and why that's important?
Absolutely. I love this question. Thank you to Jonathan for it. I grew up in higher ed. I'm currently a PhD student in organizational leadership policy and development at the University of Minnesota, studying higher education administration. I've only worked in higher education. And so I think to truly understand what's happening on the ground, what's happening with our students, we have to have higher ed leadership on the board and to have people who are actually experienced in teaching and working directly with students and what the true issues are at the collegiate level. So I think that historically having professors on the corporation, involved in the corporation, I would almost extend beyond that and say staff, people that are involved in student services, that are working directly with student communities. These roles are critically important. So beyond those who know the investment side, all of this is deeply important in moving these narratives forward, but also having people who really truly care about higher education and the future of higher education. We're moving into a new era. COVID-19 has changed the education system forever. We will never go back to what it was before COVID. Institutions will look differently. Colleges and universities have a lot of responsibility that we've had to take up. Mental health issues, financial crises, so many things that are very, very different than they were before. And so I think that collective leadership, this is something that I'm very passionate about, that I hope will be one of 3 perspectives that we bring, is really truly loving and caring for higher education and learning and teaching and helping students to grow. So I love that question. I really appreciate it. And I think that it's critically important that we push more voices like that onto the board as well.
So Ann Weisberg asked a question, since you are all 3 women, how are we sort of leveraging the women alums of Harvard, and is there sort of an institutional way to connect to them? And I would just add to that question, what should we be doing to make sure that women know that, again, there's not gender equity on the overseers right now, and that this would be an opportunity to write that? Are you guys connecting with any of those groups? Go ahead, Yvette.
Yeah, I will just, well, I will say, I think, we are individually members of different SIGs, different clubs that do have a women or a gender focus. I've certainly tried reaching out to communities that I'm an alum of. For example, the Women in Public Policy program at the Kennedy School was really instrumental to me in my time as a doctoral student. And I think my ask to those of you who are excited and who care about our candidacy here as well would be, if you are involved in some of these groups, if you are connected with the leadership of those groups, a message from you about highlighting our candidacies would really help, because I have certainly sent emails to different women focused groups and I'm still waiting for responses. I've probably annoyed them with a few follow-ups as well. But we're so excited whenever we're possible to not only have them uplift our candidacy, but also we want to be in conversation. We want to have, conversations and hear about the issues that matter to them and be able to elevate those and consider those as well. So again, my call here for you all is that if those of you on the call here tonight are excited about our candidacy and are willing to help us connect in with some of these groups, we would love an introduction, because it might hold additional weight to the outreach we've also tried.
Fantastic. Are there any strategies that we feel like we learned that worked from last time that we also want people to do? So we sort of mentioned you could host a Zoom house party where, again, you invite your own friends and networks to come meet one of the candidates. We want to make that worth the candidate's time. So we're aiming to have 50 people on a particular Zoom to sort of do that. So anybody who wants to host something with their own network live. But what are the other kinds of strategies? And maybe this is a Danielle and Nathan question that people used in the past that we think was a winning strategy for the candidates who made it.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that the most effective thing is to tell your friends. We find that alumni are overwhelmingly supportive of the Harvard Forward mission and vision and platform and candidates. It's a matter of getting this in front of them. People don't think about the Board of Overseers elections. People don't know about the Board of Overseers elections. And so the most important thing and the most effective thing we've found is literally just getting this information in front of new eyes, so that people can learn about it and they'll be overwhelmingly likely to support it. But I'll be sharing our volunteer toolkit that has, step by step how you can reach out to all of your direct contacts, how you can reach people through the alumni directory. That was another tool that volunteers really enjoyed and that helped us reach beyond our own personal networks in getting Harvard Forward in front of new, fresh eyes. So that's all. I'd say a lot of ways to get this in front of people, but getting it in front of people is the most important thing you can be doing.
Remember, 15% turnout. We can transform this race in a minute if we all start focusing. We have 7 weeks, right? It's a 7-week marathon starting tomorrow. So we can turn this thing around. So we have a question. So the immediate task is to get alumni to vote. Correct. To vote for the Harvard Forward 3. We want all 3 votes. The question is, are any women on this call active in the Harvard Alumni for Global Women's Empowerment? I would love to connect with you about how to get in touch with leadership there. So perhaps if that's a question from Yvette, if we have any connections or if we have 3 to 6 degrees of separation to them, how do we get to them? Because I think, again, more outreach, the better. We also know that people are not going to vote the minute they get their email tomorrow, right? So we do have some time to sort of reach out and to galvanize people. Danielle, was the voting mainly happening at the end? Did we have any patterns? Do we know anything about the voting in terms of like, when should we be intervening? Like, what's the timing? When do people pay attention?
So we don't have any data on when people exactly vote. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information to work with. However, as you said earlier, we do know that less than 15% of people voted last year. I would assume a lot of people vote when they get their emails or their ballots from Harvard. So the first email from Harvard is going out tomorrow with your personalized link So it's easy to text a friend, message friends and say, hey, check your email today, check your spam, check your promotions tab. You should have a link to vote, and here's the information about Harvard Forward, which will be up on harvardforward.org/vote.
So this was an important question, which is how will our 3 candidates be identified in the voting materials? So they're not going to be called Harvard Forward, but they will be called petition candidates. Is that correct?
Yes, so they will be in a separate section on the ballot. So this is something that Harvard, I know I've been dropping historical tidbits into the chat, but in the 80s, the Harvard Radcliffe Alumni Against Apartheid organized a really successful campaign to get alumni onto the Board of Overseers on a divestment from apartheid era South Africa. And because they were successful and they got a couple of folks elected, including Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Harvard then changed the rules about petition candidates. And one of the things that they did was they moved petition candidates to being at the bottom of the ballot in a separate section, clearly identified as petition candidates. And they also compressed the number of people that Harvard put up. So Harvard used to nominate more folks. And then when petition candidates were on the ballot, they lowered that number to 8. And after they did that, and after the 1989 election, no petition candidates had ever won again up until Harvard Forward last year. And then when Harvard Forward got folks nominated and elected last year, Harvard has then again try to lock out petition candidates. So they changed the rules after last year's election. So now a maximum of 6 petition candidates can be on the board at a time. So Harvard Forward is obviously super excited to support 3 individual candidates who are amazing, but we're also really working to show why democratic and open and fair elections are so important to this institution, and that we think it's better for the university to engage with petition candidacies and with kind of this type of grassroots organizing.
So we have a comment from Dr. Agarwal that Ron Klain is following you guys on Twitter. So I would just want to throw out, what's the role of influencers? I know Bill McKibben has been a big fan of this slate. How can we promote other endorsers and leverage their authority? Any of our candidates want to talk about that? The Globe op-ed? Can we share that actually, Danielle, to everyone?
Yes, I will drop it in the chat.
So I think it's, it's often, I think it's our personal endorsements plus some sort of objective endorsement. So I think, Bill McKibben obviously is an icon in the field of climate. And so to share, that he's supporting the Harvard Forward slate, that he made a really, I think, compelling argument about we all should. And I think that there's a generational shift of leadership here in the climate movement and the racial justice movement, and that we want to support young women too, in terms of generational diversity and trying to diversify the Board of Overseers. Roni says the latest research out of the Kennedy School is that one of the most effective asks that you can make of someone is to triple their vote by naming 3 friends that they will encourage to vote. All they have to do is fill out a form at Harvard Forward, and we'll remind them to remind their friends. Love it. You guys got to go institute that. 3 friends and 3 friends and 3 friends. This is how, math works. We got to get visibility for our folks. So we have the Bill McKibben question. Beyond changing the rules for how many petition candidates can be eligible for each year's election, has the Harvard administration pushed back so far to suppress the progressive vote?
Well, I'll jump in and answer this one as well, since it's, again, the history is always fun. If anyone participated in nominating candidates last year, or even nominating this year, they understand how incredibly difficult it is. Last year, you had to sign physical forms or print forms and then scan them and email them in because they would not accept electronic signatures. To nominate a candidate, you need to have your Harvard key, which most folks don't have, or people especially who graduated a while ago. And you don't need your Harvard key to vote. That's the good news. They send you a personalized link and you can vote online without having to go through all the hassle of the Harvard key. But for some reason to nominate, you do need to go through the Harvard key process. And we just see that Harvard consistently just fails to acknowledge that petition candidacies exist. You'll see a lot of the stuff they put out talk about the nominating committee and how that process works. And they just conveniently seem to forget that there are petition candidacies as well, and that's part of the history of the university's governance is this petition candidacies. And I think overall the biggest element is the lack of awareness and participations of elections. People don't vote because they don't know about these elections. They think they don't matter. And you see people say like, oh, the board's just rubber stamping. It doesn't have any real power. That's not true. Historically, it's not true. The Board of Overseers is the original governing body of the university. And I think it's been stripped of a lot of its power, or people have been told it doesn't have any power, but that is, I think, something we can change and push back on. And I do think there was a question in the chat for from earlier. I don't know, Jennifer, if you saw it from Jordy.
I'm sorry if I missed it. I think that everyone should know, though, because we want to be respectful of everyone's time tonight, that they can reach out to Danielle or Nathan afterwards with questions. The website is incredibly comprehensive, and I suggest that people go peruse it. There's a lot of wonderful information there about the vision and the pillars and the purpose, and of course, fantastic bios of our extraordinary candidates. I want to thank all three of them for inviting me here today to be a small part of this. I am ready to do my Zoom house party and mobilize all my friends. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Nathan to bring us to a close.
All right, thank you. I think we can be ambitious and fit in one more question. John, I see you got your hand raised.
Sorry, John.
Hi.
Yes.
Nathan, I just wanted to, this was an extraordinary, motivating evening. All three, Megan, Natalie, Yvette, were just, if you needed any reason to be purposeful and optimistic and hopeful about Harvard, you guys provided it. Oh my God. I'm a former Secretary of State of Vermont, of the state of Vermont, and I made my maiden speech on the House floor on divesting from South Africa. That turned out to be a very good decision for us because we actually made money for our teachers and state employees' pension funds because of it. And I've been involved in that fight here in Vermont to get our treasurer who is resistant to the divestment to do the same thing. And I myself divested several years ago. We had a cheese company, we sold it, we made a little money. And my portfolio without fossil fuels, without stranded assets, did better than all the other people in my money manager's account. And he brags about that now. So it's a big deal. We don't need to feel apologetic. And you guys are, Natalie, your conviction about climate, and Yvette about diversity, and oh my God, this is such an important thing. So tonight I wrote a letter to 50 classmates, and I'll send it to you, Nathan, if I've got your email address. I must say, I was having trouble connecting with anybody at Harvard Forward. So I was saddened by that there wasn't a person that I could be in touch with specifically. So it felt like it was going off into the ether, but regardless, I'm sending the letter to my 50 friends and hope we get a few votes. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. And John, you want to take a second?
I just want to tell you how inspiring this is. I'm a graduate of the Kennedy School and was involved in a divestment that successfully got the name Engelhardt off the Kennedy School Library. I spend most of my waking hours dealing with divest Princeton. And I can tell you that this group is light years more advanced in terms of how you are trying to infiltrate the governments of our universities. Way to go.
Thank you. Well, I think it is really important to have both an inside-outside strategy where, you know, we're building on the work of student activists who have, you know, for many years applied pressure to the university and giving them allies on the inside who can actually affect university policy is just going to make, you know, their demands more likely to be met. So, I mean, thank you again, everyone, for joining. We are inspired right back by the fact that all these people from across schools and across class years support Harvard Forward and are going to go to bat for our candidates. We will follow up after this to everyone that registered with, you know, how to get a hold of us, links to all the volunteer toolkit stuff that we mentioned. Don, I promise I'll look over your draft before you send it out. But thank you so much. I don't know if the candidates want to have any closing words before we call it a night.
I would love to just quickly say thank you for making the time, to sharing this space with us, for your encouragement and support, and for voting and spreading the word to so many. Really grateful, and always happy to connect via LinkedIn is the easiest way to reach me, but please stay connected.
I'll just echo Yvette and say thank you, Pilamoye, so much for spending your evening with us, and we appreciate all of you, and let's get to the finish line together. We're excited about it.
Thank you. Muito obrigada. And let's do it. Please vote. Please share the word. And yeah,